You talk about this study of V.O. Chidambaram Pillai as a 40-year journey, right? In fact, you even write, a search that shaped my vocation as a historian, my life as a social being, and my conscience as an individual. That seems a bit much for a book. Do you think of this as a magnum opus of sorts?
Uh, Words like magnum opus are big words. They are reserved for the masters. So I wouldn't describe it in those terms. But this is for me a very important book because whatever I am, I became that because of my research on Chidambaram Pillai. I started when I was 14. And I became a historian because I started studying him. And I wanted to understand him and his times. So it has taken me 40 years to do research, and I was hesitant to write for various reasons. I was intimidated by the whole project because it was a long life. And the second problem that I faced was that because I had worked over many decades, the notes that I had gathered, the material that I had gathered, were not in the kind of systematic way in which, say, let us say, Sunil Amrit or Aditya Balasubramaniam do. That's not how I started. I wrote on notebooks, I wrote on slips of paper, I have photocopies, I have paper clippings. So over 40 years, in all forms, I have had this material. So it was intimidating. And also, I was hesitant because I was not sure if I was up to handling this project. But the pandemic and the lockdown changed everything. Suddenly, first of all, I felt very mortal. I felt time was running out. Then I used that time to organize my material. And once I started organizing the material, I had some confidence. And that also coincided with the sesquicentennial of VOC's birth. So I had actually done 7 or 8 books in Tamil on Chidambaram Pillai, but I wanted to write in English because I realized that, people outside Tamil Nadu simply don't know who he is. In Tamil Nadu, every neighborhood, there is a VOC street, there is a VOC Nagar, there is a VOC park, there are VOC statues. But outside Tamil Nadu, who knows him? And I think he's a very important figure.
Why so? Why is he a hero for you? Why is he so important?
How often have you heard of a story where a single man sets out to start a shipping company? And that too against the heaviest odds. These odds are intimidating even to think even now. So in that sense, first that was the great thing. And he was a tragic hero. And he is also an unsung hero. So I think that is the perfect combination to capture the imagination of a 14, 15-year-old boy. A boy who is short, with a snotty nose, who's not good at anything. He captured my imagination. And then that was the time, when I was reading extensively, I was reading biographies. And I realized that, biographies in India are very sparse. They are very poorly written. They are not well researched. And they tend to be hagiographical without being critical. So I said I should do something about this, and that's how I started collecting the material. My idea, I didn't believe that I could write a book. I said I would put together this material, and someday some good historian would come up, look up this material and write. But it turned out that nobody turned up, so I began.
You are the good historian in the end. Okay. Compared to your earlier books, especially the ones that I quite enjoyed, the book on Bharati's poetry copyright, which is called Who Owns That Song, and of course Tamil characters. This one feels, if you'll forgive me, dense, right? It feels jam-packed with so much information, so many names, and 1/4 of every page is footnotes. Do you think of this as more of a scholarly endeavor? Not to accuse any of your earlier ones as not scholarly, but I'm saying, is this more academic in nature? Is this for an audience that's interested in academic kind of writing?
I think academics would think that I'm not an academic because I try actually to make people read. Because I get excited by the subjects that I handle, and I want to communicate this excitement to my readers. That is my primary aim. And also the advantage of being an academic or a historian in India is that since nobody really cares, the system doesn't either reward good historians or more importantly does not punish bad historians or bad scholars. This gives you great amount of freedom to do what you want. So I've decided that I want to write for a more general audience, but without swerving off the path of the historian's vocation. So I want to be true to the profession, but at the same time address a larger audience. This is what I've always tried to do. I've tried to do that in Tamil. In this particular case, because the material is completely new, and much of the material, this very sad thing that I have to say is that not just the exciting task, but also the difficult task of collecting the material. Much of the material that I consulted 30, 40 years ago don't exist anymore. They are lost. So I wanted to somehow record this for posterity. And as I said, I want everything to be documented. Otherwise, if you go around telling somebody that, in a small port town deep in the south, one person, started a shipping company and fought the world's largest shipping behemoth, nobody is going to believe it. So that is one aspect. But I must also thank my publisher. Trade publishers, even academic publishers today do not want to do footnotes. They want to do only endnotes. Preferably, they wouldn't want to have any notes. So that is how the story goes. So that is what much of the books that you see, books that pass for works of history. So I was willing to compromise. I told my publisher that, let us have some notes. There are notes as distinct from references. Let us have references at the end, but I want some notes at the bottom of the page. Initially, my editor said, trade books, no, we can't do that. And I never argue with marketing and sales because they know more than us. Because our books are all lying stacked up in my publisher's warehouse. So I know that. But once the editing process started, my editor, Manasi, said that, the notes have a lot of stuff. And much of this material is unknown to people. And more importantly, I want people to, actually believe that all this is true. This is not a work of fiction. It sounds like fiction. As you can see, it has all those elements. There is a tragic hero, there is a powerful villain, then there are comedians, then there are backsliders, there are backstabbers, there are cutthroats, there are opportunists. So there is also a very tragic heroine, in the form of Chidambaram Pillai's wife. So one thing that it's a very sad part of this story, but this is a very important story. Even though I have looked at Chidambaram Pillai for 40 years, only in the last 5 or 6 years, I've realized how important Meenakshi is in this whole story. She's 12 years old when she is married to a man who's 17 years older. It's almost like, Mahadev Govind Ranade and his younger wife, only that Chidambaram Pillai was not preaching at that time against child marriage. So he is 17 years older than her. And within 3 or 4 years, she is the mother of 2 children. And by this time, this man is away most of the time, going all around, collecting money, buying ships, giving lectures, mobilizing the people. And by the time she is 18, her husband is charged with something called sedition. I am sure Meenakshi or anybody else would have actually known what it meant. And then the worst blow, next blow comes, her husband is sentenced to 2 life imprisonments. A man has 1 life. He gets 2 life imprisonments. And that too is supposed to be transported. Then her brother-in-law goes mad listening to The moment he hears this sentence, her brother-in-law goes mad. And she has aging in-laws. When her husband is in prison, the father-in-law dies. And there is one moving letter that she writes to her father-in-law. This 19-year-old girl tells her father-in-law, please don't worry that, my husband, your son has gone to prison. Where the place he has gone to is a temple of knowledge. When he comes out, he will bring greater fame to us. So this 19-year-old girl is consoling her aged father-in-law. And the letters are such, I don't know, she would not have gone to school beyond 11th or 12th age. She could not have gone to school. But she writes in such beautiful Tamil. It is bristling with allusions to Tirukkural. And such moving lines. And there is one line, which I cannot recall without, my eyes welling up. She is writing to his friends, Chidambaram Pillai's friends, saying, many of you came to my home when my husband was around and enjoyed our hospitality. Now when I write to you, you don't even reply. I've written 4 letters to you. Please write to me. Reply to my letters. Then at one place she says that, see, this woman single-handedly led the legal defense. From the Sessions Court to the High Court, she almost approached the Privy Council in London. It didn't work out. She raised money for it. All the property was sold. All her jewels were sold. And finally, she had borrowed money from everybody. And then finally, she says that, I have exhausted all resources. Now, I am willing even to do coolie work, as long as it doesn't, harm my honor and womanly chastity. So this is one part of this. All these things I said, demanded a book. And then I said, this time, let me write a book in English. I want to write a book in English about this man. And I must say that, some of my very best friends, from whom I have learnt a lot, they dissuaded me from writing a book on the shipping company alone. They told me, who would be interested in that? Write a biography of Chidambaram Pillai where this would be one chapter. But my instinct told me that first is no book is going to be a bestseller. It's a matter of a few thousand copies. I might as well write a book which would give me satisfaction, where I would give the best. So I thought the best subject. Yeah.
Isn't the point of the book also that apart from the shipping company, VOC's life, there was politics, which you cover extensively. But once he goes to jail and comes back, he kind of, life is relegated to obscurity, and there is really not a lot that you bring up in this book either. So in a way, do you feel like the decision was made because the shipping company and VOC's lives, the best part of the story is intertwined so closely there, and there is nothing else?
Yes, this is the most interesting part of the story, but that doesn't exhaust his life. So let me warn my readers that I plan to write 2 more volumes of the same size. But the choice of this was that, I wanted to have a self-contained theme which would appeal to a larger audience, that is a non-Tamil audience. I really want to address this audience. I want to get them interested in, Indian history cannot be reduced to, Bankim, Tagore, Gandhi and Nehru. And now it is all Savarkar and Sardar Patel. Yes, they are big names, yes. But why should there not be books on Narayana Guru or Periyar or Bharatiyar or Vausi? So this is what I want to write, even though I know that the market is limited, but I'm trying to write something that will interest them. And I thought, what better than this, David and Goliath story? It has all the elements for a great drama, a tragic drama. So that is why I chose this and restricted it to that. And I did not go in detail about the other aspects of his life. I do end with his afterlife, but that will have to cover another volume. That will require another volume. And one more volume about his Swadeshi movement activities and his prison life. This prison life itself is very rich. This is at a time, when, for instance, to this day, the case against him on charges of sedition is still a case law. It is as important a case law as the case against Tilak. So these are all issues that will have to be covered. But unfortunately, our market, the book market, I am actually thankful that, Penguin let me publish a 500-page book. But to ask for a 1,000-page book would be, I know that, quite unfair. But I do hope 2 more volumes can be written. So this is there. His life is, there is not one aspect of Tamil history or one aspect of Tamil historical life in the 20th century with which he was not connected. He was connected with the Swadeshi movement. He was part of the anti-colonial movement. He was part of the labor movement. He was part of the non-Brahmin movement. He was a literary scholar. So all these things are there. To cover everything would be difficult. And that is also why it has taken me so long to do all these things. And this is also my training as a historian. Every time I wanted to understand something about, say, his labor movement activities, I had to read up all the stuff that had been published about the labor movement in Tamil Nadu. So that is the story.
No, while you're answering that question, you said there is not enough historical literature being written at all, right? Now, either it's Gandhi, Tilak, Tagore, and there is not much from the South. Why do you think that is?
Well, to put it in very simple terms, I think the Tamil middle class has failed the Tamil people. What the Bengali Bhadralok did for Bengal, the Tamil middle class did not come anywhere close to it. So I think that is the failure. But if there are young students here, that is an advantage. If there had been good historians earlier, I would not have become a historian. So there is a saying in Tamil, "Ala illa urla ilupappu sakarai." So in that sense, so if there are young students here, there are lots and lots of topics to work on. It is not like, where, like the American Civil War. I think American Civil War, every village, every day in the Civil War has been covered. There's nothing more to write. But here we have large swaths left behind and also colorful personalities. You mentioned Tamil characters. So many colorful personalities. So they all, they, rather than challenge you, they actually tempt you to, attempt a portrait. Yeah.
We spoke a lot about VOC's public personality. But what I also found interesting was that there are certain parts of the book where we just get a small glimpse of him, right? Like there is this letter that he writes to someone where he says, in all my thought in my half absent-mindedness that I had replied to you, but turns out I hadn't replied. And you get how overwhelmed he was with everything that was going on in his life. So whether in this book or not, can you tell us a little bit about what he was as a person? What he would have been in his personal life, what he would have been at home, something where he is not a patriot or an orator or something that's not public life?
We know very little about that. And I think Indians, we gossip about the personal life of our leaders, our heroes, everything. But when it comes down to actually putting it on paper, don't do it. So let us say somebody in the West, they live very private lives. The neighbors don't know what they are up to. But 10 years after their death, their entire archives is opened and you know every little thing. Here the entire, it is a completely reversed story. You know a lot about their personal life. Everybody knows everything about the various our cinema heroes and leaders. But you cannot write, you can't put down anything on paper, and we don't preserve private papers. So in the case of Chidambaram Pillai, there were two or three accidents. One was that, his glorious days ended in 1912. He died in 1936. So by the time I started in 1981, but by that time, people who had known him closely had passed away. One. The other tragedies was that one in 1908 when he was given 2 life imprisonments, all his friends and associates destroyed all the papers. Whatever was left behind, 3 years later, when the British collector Ash, who was responsible for the crushing of the Swadeshi Steam Company, he was assassinated. Everybody developed cold feet. All his friends, they first contributed money to Ash's memorial. They acted as his pallbearers. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. Can you imagine a Brahmin carrying the corpse of a Milecha? You cannot get more theatre than this. It cannot get more polluted than this. But they were so scared. And then they destroyed all the papers. Nothing was left. Then added to this tragedy was that Chidambaram Pillai was not somebody who would beat his chest and trumpet his own glories and his achievements. So then, and the final nail in the coffin was that it is a double-edged sword. 1961, a movie is made about Chidambaram Pillai with Sivaji Ganesan starring, and it was a commercial failure. It was a commercial failure, but it was a critical success. So it took the story of Chidambaram Pillai across Tamil Nadu. But the flip side was that when I started doing my work, doing oral interviews, people started narrating stories from that film. Episodes and anecdotes. I said, I don't want to hear this. And I was at that time, very Rankian kind of historian, Unless and until I get something in written form, I would not accept that as evidence. So that, all these things complicated the story. So we really don't know. But one thing I can tell you is that his children, his family, and others, they were all, much younger. His elder children had died. And his second son, the story is very close to that of Gandhi and Harilal. Similar story. But to cut a long story short, by the time, nobody remembered much. But one thing they told me was, he was a short-tempered man, and he was an adamant person. It fits perfectly with, otherwise how else would a small-time pleader from some remote corner end up launching a shipping company? So he was steadfast, he was stubborn, adamant, refused to compromise. He could look at the district collector in his eyes and challenge him.
I have one more question, but if there are audience questions. Yes, sir.
What kind of Swadeshi spirit today you see in India?
Well, please prove your spirit by making this book a success. That would be the yardstick. If at least 100 copies sell at the end of this talk, I would say the Swadeshi spirit is well and thriving.
Spoken like a businessman, huh?
Which Chidambaram Pillai unfortunately was not.
All right, we have like 3-4 more minutes, so I'll ask you my last question. One thing that I loved about this book was that there's a lot of seafaring metaphors and puns, and you kind of make it immersive with language. You say his career was shipwrecked. And speaking of hiring Vijay Raghvachari, you write that VOC netted a big fish. In fact, your last sentence in the book is still waters run deep. How much fun did you have writing this book?
I'm sorry, writing is not fun. Reading is fun. If you let me, I'll keep reading the whole day. Writing is a tortuous process. I don't want to write, but I am forced to write. But then, it is like, once again, to use a metaphor from steam industrialism, So it's like a piston, you know, you have to work yourself up, put pressure on yourself, and then you have to write. It comes to a stage. I want to quote a line from Kutrala Kuravanji. When the oracle speaks, that Kuravanji speaks, துடிக்குதன் உதடும் நாவும் சொல்லு சொல்லு எனவே நாவில் இடிக்குது குரலி அம்மே. He said, you know, something possesses you, and then you write. And I can assure you that, you know, I didn't write this book because there are, when I read, there are some really nice passages. I can't believe that I wrote it. This is Chidambaram Pillai and his own heroism. He chose, like God chose a weak prophet. Chidambaram Pillai chose a weak historian to demonstrate what a big hero he was. Even in the hands of a greenhorn historian, his sacrifices, his heroism would shine through.